Chapter 1. The moment Juliet was reborn, she found herself back at 27. She had a son and a daughter, and her husband was Damian Thorne, the richest man in the world, a man who perpetually topped the Forbes list, was named the world's most eligible bachelor by Time magazine, and was so coveted that even the British royal family wanted to offer him a princess. Everyone said she had hit the jackpot, but the first thing she did was take a set of divorce papers to find his first love. She pushed the agreement in front of Isabel, her voice calm. "I want a divorce. Damian is yours. The 2 children are yours, too." Isabel stared at her, stunned. She couldn't believe that the woman who had held the title of Mrs. Thorne for 6 years would suddenly abdicate her throne. Juliet added nonchalantly, "Since they all prefer you, I'll grant you your wish. Just get Damian to sign. Once the waiting period is over, I'll be gone." This time, she wouldn't repeat the mistakes of her past. She refused to continue being the ignored and invisible Mrs. Thorne. Isabel's fingertips traced the rim of her coffee cup, her brow furrowed. "Juliet, what kind of game are you playing?" Juliet watched the shifting emotions on Isabel's face and repeated calmly, "I'm not playing a game, I'm just done." "Juliet, do you have any idea how many women in this city would kill to be in your position?" "I do," Juliet said, meeting her gaze directly. "That's why I'm giving it to you." A crack finally appeared in Isabel's composed facade. She stared at the papers for a long moment before finally taking them. "Fine. If you're being so generous, I won't be polite." Her eyes narrowed. "But you should remember, once something is in my hands, I never let it go." "Don't worry," Juliet said with a faint smile. "I won't have any regrets." After all, she had already tasted a lifetime of loneliness in her past life. Isabel stood up and moved to another table in the cafe. She gracefully pulled out her phone, her fingers tapping lightly on the screen. When the call connected, her voice instantly softened. "Damian, I'm at Blue Mountain Cafe. Can you come pick me up?" Juliet sat nearby, a bitter smile touching her lips. Once upon a time, 9 out of 10 calls she made to Damian were answered by his assistant. But now, in less than 20 minutes, the man who was perpetually in a meeting appeared at the cafe's entrance. Through the glass window, Juliet watched Damian stride in, his bespoke black suit accentuating his broad shoulders and narrow waist. The moment they saw Isabel, her 6-year-old son Leo and 4-year-old daughter Lily rushed into her arms, hugging and kissing her. "Aunt Isabel," Lily chirped sweetly, rubbing her small face against Isabel's side. Damian placed a cake box on the table, his long, elegant fingers pushing it forward. "Your favorite matcha flavor. I had the chef go light on the sugar." Isabel's eyes lit up. "You always remember." Juliet sat in the corner, her nails digging into her palms. In 6 years of marriage, Damian didn't even know her favorite flavor. In her last life, when she was sick in the hospital and craved a strawberry shortcake, he had his assistant grab one at random. It turned out to be mango, which she was deathly allergic to. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Damian's voice was a low murmur. "French or Italian?" Isabel smiled, pulling the divorce papers from her purse. "Before that, there's a document I'd like you to see." She opened it to the signature page. "I have my eye on a penthouse, but I'm a little short on liquid cash. Could you?" Damian took the pen and signed his name without even glancing at the contents. "Between us, why do we need to be so formal?" "Is Aunt Isabel buying a new house?" Leo asked, tilting his head up. "Daddy, you should buy the one next door, Lily, and I want to move in with Aunt Isabel. We don't want to be with Mom all day." Damian's brow furrowed slightly, but seeing the hopeful looks in his children's eyes, he relented. "All right, we'll buy it." "Oh, that's too much trouble," Isabel said quickly. "I'll just leave 3 rooms for Leo, Lily, and you. You can come stay whenever you miss me." The children cheered. Lily even threw her arms around Isabel's neck and kissed her cheek. "Aunt Isabel is the best 1,000 times better than Mom." Juliet's heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, a dull ache that made it hard to breathe. She saw the corner of Damian's mouth lift into a gentle curve, a tenderness he had never once shown her. Unable to watch any longer, she grabbed her bag and walked out. The moment she stepped outside, memories of her past life flooded back. In her previous life, she and Damian had an arranged marriage for business. They had a son and a daughter, and she lived to be 62, but she was never happy. All because Damian's heart had always belonged to his childhood sweetheart, Isabel. After they had broken up back then, Isabel went abroad. Damian drank for days, but his pride kept him from trying to win her back. Instead, he agreed to the family's arrangement. Damian had been her girlhood dream, a man as remote and perfect as a deity. Which socialite in New York's high society didn't dream of marrying the head of the Thorn Corporation? So when she learned of the impending marriage, she was ecstatic. But after the wedding, she poured her entire being into loving him, only to be met with his eternal distance and indifference, until Isabel returned. He never mentioned divorce, but his eyes never left Isabel. Worse, both of their children adored Isabel and grew distant from her. In her later years, Juliet was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Under the guise of quiet recuperation, Damian abandoned her alone in their old country estate. On her birthday, she trembled as she dialed her husband and children, only to learn they were on vacation with Isabel in the Maldives. She tried to bake herself a small birthday cake, but in her confusion, she forgot to turn off the oven as the fire consumed her. The last thing Juliet remembered was the icy look in Damian's eyes as he placed the wedding ring on her finger. She closed her eyes in agony, her only wish being that if there was a next life, she would never again waste it on him. By the time Juliet returned to their penthouse, it was already dark. But she didn't rest. She went straight to work, clearing things out. Damian's suits and shirts, the children's toys, the family portraits, one by one, she tossed them into cardboard boxes. "What are you doing?" Damian's voice suddenly came from behind her. Juliet turned to see him standing at the door, holding the hands of their two children, his brow tightly furrowed. "Why is Mommy throwing away our stuff?" Lily ran over, her face turning red with anger when she saw her favorite teddy bear in a box. Leo glared at her furiously. "We just went to play with Aunt Isabel for a little while. Do you have to be this angry?" Damian stared at her, his gaze as cold as ever. "The children like spending time with Isabel. Is it necessary to throw a tantrum over something so trivial?" "I'm not angry," Juliet said calmly. "Liar," Lily shrieked. "You're just jealous of Aunt Isabel, that's why you're throwing away my teddy bear, you're a bad mommy." "When I grow up, I'm moving in with Aunt Isabel," Leo said viciously, pulling his sister's hand. "And I'll never come back to see you." Damian didn't stop the children's outburst, only frowning slightly, his deep eyes sweeping over Juliet. It was the look one gives a stranger making an unreasonable scene. "That's enough," he said, his lips barely moving. The low, aristocratic tone was innate. He adjusted his cufflinks with a careless grace. "I have a video conference with the board. Throw away whatever you want, just don't make a scene." The moment the door closed, Juliet's tears finally fell. Her heart felt like it had been torn to shreds, every breath tasting of blood. She wiped her tears and looked at the mess on the floor, then suddenly, she laughed. Don't worry, she wouldn't disturb him. For the rest of her life, she never would. Chapter 2, ever since the divorce papers were signed, Juliet stopped managing the household. She no longer woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare nutritious breakfasts for the children. She no longer waited up late for Damian to return from his social engagements to make him a hangover-soothing broth. The chores she once considered her duty were now all handed over to the staff. At first, no one noticed anything was wrong. Not until Leo was late for school and got reprimanded by his teacher, until Lily couldn't find her homework, until the hands on Damian's prized pocket watch stopped moving. The maids scrambled, but they could never meet the standards of the lady of the house. Dishes piled up in the sink, toys littered the living room floor, and the iron shirts were never quite crisp enough. The once impeccably organized home slowly descended into chaos. When Damian pushed open the bedroom door, Juliet was leaning against the window, reading a book. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting dappled shadows on her. "How long are you going to keep this up?" he asked from the doorway, his voice low. Juliet closed the book and looked up at him. "I'm not keeping anything up." "Then why have you stopped taking care of the house?" He took a few steps closer, the faint scent of ambergris from his cologne filling the air. "Are you still angry about last time?" "I'm not angry." She placed the book aside. "I just don't want to do it anymore." Damian narrowed his eyes, his long fingers tapping lightly on the nightstand. "Reason? I'm tired," she said simply. "There are maids. It can get done without me." She thought of her past life, how she'd risen before dawn every day. Damian's coffee had to be exactly 185 degrees Fahrenheit, his toast a perfect golden brown. The children's clothes had to be hand-washed, even their socks ironed. And what did she get in return? Damian's tenderness for Isabel, her children's affection for Aunt Isabel, and her own lonely death on her 62nd birthday. Juliet, his voice turned cold. If you're throwing a tantrum, just say so. Don't act like a 3-year-old. She pulled at the corner of her lips. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I just want to rest. Before she could finish, the door was thrown open. Leo and Lily burst in, their faces filled with rage. Mommy is so lazy, Lily shrieked. We want Aunt Isabel to come take care of us, Leo chimed in. Aunt Isabel is kinder than you, works harder than you, and is 1,000,000 times better than you. Damian's gaze remained locked on Juliet's face, as if waiting for her to break. But she just took a deep breath and said softly, Since you think she's so great, then bring her over. I have no objection. The air instantly froze. Damian's face darkened completely. Are you sure? Juliet took another deep breath. Absolutely. Daddy, let's go. Lily tugged impatiently at Damian's sleeve. I want Aunt Isabel to come over right now. With Aunt Isabel here, we won't need you anymore. Leo made a face at Juliet. You can just leave. Get out of this house. Damian finally glanced at Juliet one last time. Seeing her still unmoved, he turned and strode away with the children. Juliet stood motionless, listening to the sound of the car engine fade into the distance, and gently closed her eyes. Soon, she would give them exactly what they wanted. She would leave them and this house for good. Chapter 3, the first day Isabel moved in, she immediately directed the staff to rearrange the living room. This sofa is so drab. Her slender fingers grazed across the leather couch as she turned to Damian with a soft smile. Damian, can we change it for a cream-colored one? Without blinking, Damian instructed the butler. Do as Miss Dubois says. Juliet stood on the landing of the staircase, watching as movers carried out the sofa she had painstakingly chosen just 6 months ago. Leo and Lily trailed after Isabel like 2 little ducklings, pointing excitedly. Aunt Isabel, these pillows have to go too. The ones Mom bought are so ugly. Isabel gently stroked their heads. All right, we'll replace them all. Juliet's fingers tightened for a moment, then relaxed. She had hand-stitched those pillows while she was pregnant, filling them with hypoallergenic down feathers because her children had sensitive skin when they were little. Now, they were being unceremoniously tossed into the trash. In the following days, the home became increasingly unfamiliar. At the dining table, Isabel sat in Juliet's usual spot, gently placing food on the children's plates. Damian would occasionally pour her a cup of coffee himself, his long fingers sliding the cup over to her, his eyes holding a softness Juliet had never received. In the evenings, the living room lights would dim, and the 4 of them would huddle on the sofa to watch movies. Lily would be curled up in Isabel's lap, Leo leaning against Damian's shoulder, their laughter echoing through the room. When Juliet passed by, they wouldn't even spare her a glance, as if she were completely invisible. What was even more ridiculous was how demanding Damian, Leo, and Lily used to be about their quality of life. But now, she watched Isabel casually toss his $1 million Patek Philippe onto the coffee table, face down, and he would just smile indulgently and put it on. She watched the children happily wear their school uniforms, which Isabel had carelessly thrown into the washer, to school with yesterday's sauce stains still on the collar. She watched Isabel pass off takeout food as her own cooking, and no one ever called her out. Even more absurdly, they spoiled Isabel to the heavens. Isabel, don't touch these things, Damian said, stopping her as she was about to clear the tea set. His long fingers gently rested on her wrist. Your hands are for playing the piano. Aunt Isabel, I'll get your bag. Leo eagerly took Isabel's limited edition handbag, an obsequious look on his face that Juliet had never seen on her son. Miss Dubois just needs to rest, the butler said respectfully, offering her a pair of Italian handmade slippers. Leave everything else to us. How ironic. She had been a glorified maid in this house for 6 years, and they had taken it all for granted. But the moment Isabel arrived, she was treated like a princess. The staff whispered among themselves constantly. Mr. Thorne is so good to Miss Dubois. I've never seen him act like that with the missus. The children are so attached to her, too. I'm telling you, this house is going to have a new mistress soon. Juliet's heart was already a dead cinder. She ignored everything and focused on quietly packing her belongings. Until one afternoon, her phone began to vibrate frantically. "Ma'am, the young master and young miss are having an allergic reaction at school. An ambulance just took them to the hospital." By the time Juliet arrived at the hospital, the two children had already been rushed into the emergency room. Damian stood in the hallway, his suit jacket slung casually over his arm, his tie loosened. His eyes were simmering with a cold, suppressed fury. "Juliet!" His voice was low, seething with anger. "What the hell have you done?" Juliet froze. "What?" "They're allergic to mangoes, did you forget?" Damian advanced on her, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "Why did you let them drink mango juice?" "It wasn't me," Juliet looked directly into his eyes. "I never buy mangoes for the house." Ever since the children's first allergic reaction, she had been obsessively careful, warning everyone not to give them mangoes and even personally reviewing the school cafeteria's menu. How could she make such a basic mistake? "Not you," Damian sneered. "Then who was it, the maids, or did they try to kill themselves?" Juliet opened her mouth to speak, but a nurse came out of the room. "The children are awake." In the hospital room, Leo and Lily lay on the beds, their faces pale. When they saw their parents enter, their eyes flickered. "What happened?" Damian asked sternly. The two children exchanged a glance, then simultaneously pointed at Juliet. "It was Mom, the snack she bought before had mangoes in them." Juliet's body went rigid. She looked at them in disbelief. "What are you saying?" Chapter 4. "It was Mom," Lily cried, her voice thick with tears. "She knew we were allergic, but she gave it to us on purpose." Leo nodded emphatically. "She's so mean." Juliet's fingers gripped the doorframe, her knuckles turning white. "Leo, Lily, do you have any idea what you're saying? You'd better tell the truth right now." "Enough." Damian shot to his feet and grabbed her wrist, his grip so tight it felt like it would shatter her bones. "Juliet, is this how you act as a mother? Not only do you harm them, but now you're trying to force them to lie." "I didn't." Juliet's voice trembled. "Are you trying to say they're framing you?" He sneered. "How old are they? You can't even take responsibility for this. Do you even deserve to be a mother?" The two children burst into tears. Damian immediately let her go and turned to comfort them. But they only cried harder, their small faces flushing red. "Daddy," Lily sobbed. "It hurts so much." "What would make it better?" Damian asked softly, gently wiping away her tears. Leo looked at Juliet with red-rimmed eyes. "She's allergic to mangoes too. Make her drink mango juice, make her feel as bad as we do." An icy chill spread through Juliet's heart. She looked at Damian. The cold fury in his eyes sent a shiver down her spine. "Fine." He straightened up and snapped his fingers. Two bodyguards immediately entered the room. "Hold her down." Before Juliet could react, she was forced into a chair. A bodyguard pinched her jaw, forcing her mouth open. An entire liter of mango juice was poured down her throat. The sickly sweet liquid choked her, burning her windpipe as she coughed violently. A red rash spread across her skin at a visible rate. Her face began to swell, and breathing became increasingly difficult. She clawed at her neck in agony, her vision blurring as she looked at Damian. He just stood there, watching coldly, making no move to stop them. The children had stopped crying. They were clapping their hands excitedly. Serves her right, she deserves to feel awful too. Before darkness consumed her, the last thing Juliet saw was Damian's merciless gaze. An unknown amount of time later, Juliet woke up in a hospital bed. Her throat was raw, and the remnants of the allergic rash still stained her face. From outside the room, she heard a familiar voice. It was Isabel. "Damian, I honestly didn't know they were allergic. I just wanted to make them some juice." "It's not your fault." Damian's voice was unbelievably gentle. "You didn't know." "If I had just come forward sooner, you wouldn't have misunderstood, Juliet," she said, her tone helpless. "Leo, Lily, you too as well. It was all my fault. How could you protect me by blaming everything on your mother?" The children's remorseful voices followed clearly. "Aunt Isabel, we were wrong," Lily whimpered. We just don't like Mom?" "Yeah," Leo chimed in. "She's always bossing us around, telling us we can't have snacks and have to go to bed on time. We just wanted her to leave." Juliet's fingers clenched the bedsheet, her knuckles white. These were the children she had carried for 10 months, the children she had nearly died on the operating table to bring into this world. She remembered the day Leo was born. The hallway outside the delivery room was empty. A nurse told her Damian was in an important meeting and couldn't get away. She was in excruciating pain, but had to grit her teeth and endure it alone. Giving birth to Lily was even more perilous. She suffered a major hemorrhage, and the doctors even issued a critical condition notice. And Damian? He was overseas, closing a multinational merger deal. But now, the 2 children she had risked her life for had become the ones to hurt her the most. Chapter 5, the pain was so sharp it felt like her heart was tearing apart. Tears streamed down her face, and it took a long moment of clutching her chest for the agony to subside. Then her phone buzzed. It was the airline, confirming her flight information. "Miss Archer, your one-way ticket to Havenwood has been issued. Would you like me to select a seat for you?" "A window seat, please." "Thank you," Juliet said, hastily wiping her tears, her voice barely a whisper. Just as she hung up, the hospital room door opened. Damian walked in, his suit immaculate, every cufflink perfectly in place. "Who was that on the phone?" he asked coolly. Juliet placed her phone aside. "A friend." Damian didn't press. He stood by her bed, looking down at her. There was a mistake about what happened. It was Isabel who gave them the mango juice. His tone was as placid as if he were discussing the weather. But she didn't know. "So we're letting it go." Juliet's heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand, the pain so intense she could barely breathe. When he thought it was her, he looked like he wanted to kill her. But when it was Isabel, it was dismissed with a casual she didn't know. She opened her mouth, wanting to question him, to scream, to unleash all the pent-up grief and injustice. But the words died on her lips, leaving only a faint, inaudible, "Okay." It was as if all her strength had been drained away. She was tired, so tired she no longer had the will to argue. The grievances that had kept her up at night, the resentment that had built up day after day, now melted into a bitter, self-mocking smile. So this was the difference between being loved and not being loved. It was that simple. Damian seemed surprised by her reaction. He paused, then added, "The kids have a summer camp next week. Isabel and I will go with them. You can go home on your own." He expected her to beg or cry as she usually would, but Juliet just nodded calmly. "I understand." Damian frowned, sensing something was off about her reaction, but his phone rang at that moment. He glanced at the caller ID. "Something came up at the office. I have to go." After the door closed, Juliet finally unclenched her fist. 4 crescent-shaped, bloody marks were imprinted on her palm. Over the next few days, Juliet's phone buzzed incessantly. It was a stream of messages from Isabel, a torrent of photos and videos documenting the happy times at summer camp. In one video, Leo and Lily were proudly introducing Isabel to their classmates. "This is our mom." The other children's envious gasps were audible. "Wow, your mom is so pretty. Your dad is handsome and your mom is beautiful. You're so lucky. So who usually picks you up from school?" one child asked curiously. In the frame, Leo and Lily's expressions froze for a second. "Oh, that's our nanny." Juliet's hand trembled, and the glass of water she was holding fell to the floor, shattering. She slowly sank to her knees, looking at the broken pieces on the ground, and suddenly she laughed. So all these years, she had just been their free nanny. But it didn't matter. This nanny was about to tender her resignation. From now on, their beloved mom could take care of them. A week later, the housekeeper brought Leo and Lily back to the penthouse. The 2 children burst through the door and ran straight to the kitchen, their faces beaming with unconcealed pride. "Mom," Lily shrieked. "Did you know? Aunt Isabel sprained her ankle at the parent-child sports day, and Daddy was so worried," Leo eagerly added. Daddy rented out the entire hospital wing for Aunt Isabel, and he even postponed his company meetings to stay by her side. Juliet stood in front of the oven, listening silently to her children's boasts as she steadily pulled on a pair of oven mitts. "Mom, are you even listening?" Lily stomped her foot impatiently. "Daddy is so much nicer to Aunt Isabel than he is to you," the oven timer dinged, cutting her off. A sweet aroma filled the kitchen. The children's eyes lit up and they immediately crowded around. "It's a cake," Leo stood on his tiptoes. "I want some." Juliet took out the baking tray. The edges of the cake were slightly burnt. She frowned and dumped the entire thing into the trash can. "Ah," Lily screamed. "Why did you throw it away? It's burnt. It's inedible," Juliet said calmly. "You're lying." Leo kicked the trash can in a rage. "You did it on purpose. You're still mad at us about what happened. So you don't want to give us any. You're a bad mom." Lily's face flushed red. "We don't have a mom like you." Juliet removed the oven mitts, her heart feeling like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. She looked at the two children she had risked her life to bring into the world and suddenly found them to be complete strangers. "Good," she said softly, "because I don't have children like you either. From now on, you can go find Isabel." With that, she turned and walked towards the stairs. Behind her, she heard the children's hysterical screams. "We hate you, will always hate you." Juliet's steps faltered for a second, but she didn't turn back. Just as she set foot on the third step, a sudden, violent shove came from behind. Go to hell, Chapter 6. The world spun, and her body crashed heavily down the stairs. An excruciating pain shot through her entire body. Warm liquid trickled from her forehead, blurring her vision. The two children stood at the top of the stairs, their faces twisted into malicious grins. "Serves you right," Lily clapped her hands. "That's what you get for not giving us cake," Leo made a face. Juliet struggled to prop herself up, blood dripping from her chin onto the marble floor. She looked at these two little demons, unable to reconcile them with the infants she had fought to save in the delivery room. Suddenly, the front door was pushed open. "What's going on?" Damian's low voice echoed through the hall. Isabel followed behind him. The three of them froze at the sight. "Daddy," the two children's expressions instantly changed. They ran over, crying. "Mommy threw the cake away and wouldn't let us eat it. She said she doesn't want us anymore." "Boo-hoo." Damian's gaze fell on the cake in the trash can, then shifted to the blood-covered Juliet, his brow furrowing. "Juliet, why must you always pick a fight with the children?" His voice was as cold as ice. "How could you say something like that to your own flesh and blood? Do you even deserve to be a mother?" Juliet pushed herself up against the wall, the blood staining her collar. She looked at Damian and suddenly laughed. "In your eyes, when have I ever deserved it?" Her voice was hoarse. "Haven't you always treated me as nothing more than a tool for producing heirs?" Damian's pupils constricted. "Since the wife you want is Isabel," Juliet wiped the blood from her face, "and the children only want her as their mother, then I'll step down. I'll make your perfect little family of 4 whole." The air froze. Damian's face became incredibly grim. He stared at Juliet as if truly seeing her for the first time. "Juliet, don't forget." His voice was low and frigid. "The Thorne and Archer families had an arranged marriage. There was never any emotion involved." "What did you want from me?" "Love," he sneered. "Sorry, I can't give you that." Juliet laughed at his words. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. Yes, he was right. She was the fool. She was the idiot who thought she could bring a god down from his pedestal. Damian had indeed been brought down, but it wasn't for her. She should have known all along. "Damian, that's enough." Isabel stepped in, gently taking his arm. "The children are frightened. Let's take them upstairs first." Damian gave Juliet one last, deep look before finally turning away. He scooped up a child in each arm and left with Isabel. Juliet watched their retreating backs, the blood still dripping steadily. She was filled with an immense regret. Regret for marrying Damian, regret for giving birth to those two children. In this life, she would never repeat her mistakes. From this day forward, she would live only for herself. 3 days later, it was Leo's birthday. The party was held at the most luxurious hotel in downtown Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant glow, a champagne tower shimmered in the center of the ballroom, and Damian, as usual, had booked the entire floor for Leo's grand celebration. Juliet stood in a corner, watching Leo and Lily hold Isabel's hands, fluttering around her like 2 happy little birds. The children clung to Isabel the entire time, deliberately ignoring their own mother. Damian stood not far away, a champagne flute in his long fingers, his gaze frequently landing on Isabel, his eyes filled with a tenderness she had never received. Mr. Thorne is so devoted. After all these years, he still only has eyes for Miss Dubois. Isn't it the truth? And the children take after him, they only have eyes for Isabel too. Chapter 7, the guest's whispers reached Juliet's ears clearly. Mr. Thorne, Miss Dubois, and I were all in college together. The way he doted on her back then was legendary. A man in a tailored suit said in a low voice. He was just short of proposing before graduation. No wonder the person next to him exclaimed, "A first love is a first love. Even without the title of wife, she'll always be the most important one." Some people scheme their way into a marriage, but for what? Someone glanced at Juliet with contempt. So what if she had kids? She still can't win her husband's heart. I bet she's destined to be lonely for the rest of her life. Juliet listened quietly, her heart encased in a thick layer of ice. The feeling was dull now, no longer painful. She took a deep breath and turned towards the elevators. Just as the doors were about to close, a hand shot out and stopped them. Isabel stepped in gracefully, her red lips curved into a smile. "The divorce waiting period is up in 3 days," she said, looking directly into Juliet's eyes. "You will honor your promise and leave, won't you?" Juliet pressed the button for the ground floor. "Of course, I want to leave more than anyone." Isabel finally broke into a satisfied smile. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of the family for you. Besides, Damian and the children don't like you anyway. They'll slowly forget all about you." The elevator began its slow descent. Juliet didn't answer. Suddenly, boom, a massive jolt, a deafening noise, and the elevator plunged into darkness. "Ah," Isabel screamed, fumbling for her phone. Damian, help, the elevator is broken. Juliet was thrown against the wall. A sharp pain shot through her head as warm liquid streamed down her face. After what felt like an eternity, she heard the frantic sound of footsteps outside. "Is anyone in there all right?" A rescuer's voice called through the door. "Help us," Isabel pounded on the elevator door. "My leg is stuck." The screech of metal being pried apart was deafening. A blinding beam of light pierced the darkness. A rescuer peered inside, his face grave. "Mr. Thorne, both ladies have their legs pinned by the warped door. We're short on time and can only get one out first. Who do you want us to save?" Through her blurry vision, Juliet saw Damian standing behind the rescuer with the 2 children. His eyes were fixed on Isabel. Without a moment's hesitation, he said, "Save Isabel." "Save Aunt Isabel first," Leo and Lily cried, tugging at the rescuer's sleeve. "Hurry and save her," the rescuer frowned. "Mr. Thorne, young master, Miss Lily, the other lady is more severely injured. We strongly recommend rescuing her first." "I said, save Isabel." Damian's voice was as cold as ice. The rescuer sighed and had no choice but to reach for Isabel. Juliet watched as they carefully pulled Isabel out. The elevator door, now missing half its support, let out a terrifying groan crash. The mangled metal slammed down on her leg. An excruciating, bone-deep pain tore through her. The last thing she saw was Damian's back as he carried Isabel away, and the sight of her 2 children cheering. Then darkness completely consumed her. Chapter 8, when Juliet opened her eyes again, the piercing white light made her squint. The smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils, and the steady beep of the heart monitor echoed in her ears. "You're awake." A doctor came over to check her pupils. "You have 3 broken ribs. You're lucky you were brought in when you were, or you might not have made it." Juliet stared blankly at the ceiling, the final moments before the elevator fell replaying in her mind. Damian's unhesitating choice to save Isabel. The way he didn't even look back as the mangled door crashed down on her. She tried to move, but a searing pain shot from her chest through her entire body. Strangely, she couldn't shed a single tear. Perhaps the pain was so extreme that even her heart had gone numb. 3 days later, Damian came to pick her up from the hospital. He stood at the door of her room, his suit immaculate. His gaze fell on her bandaged chest, and he remained silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "Isabel is a dancer. I couldn't let anything happen to her legs." Juliet slowly lifted her head and looked at him. "So, I had to let you take the fall," he said, his tone as calm as if discussing the weather. "You're a housewife. Even if your mobility is affected, it won't have a major impact." Juliet didn't speak. For the first time, she saw the man she had loved for half her life with absolute clarity. His features were still as handsome as a god's, but his eyes had never held a place for her. "Damian," her voice was hoarse. "If I had died that day, would you have cared?" Damian's brow furrowed deeper. He didn't answer. He pulled a black credit card from his inner suit pocket and placed it on the nightstand. "Don't ask such meaningless questions. This is for compensation. As long as you behave yourself and raise the children, you will always be Mrs. Thorne." Juliet suddenly laughed. In her past life, she had died with the title of Mrs. Thorne, but what good did it do her? She was the one who grew old alone, the one who was forgotten, the one who burned in the fire. So, in this life, she had no desire to be his wife. She would live better, shine brighter. She would find someone who truly loved her. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The words were about to burst from her lips to tell him she was done. "Damian, A ringing phone cut her off. Damian answered. Isabel's sweet voice came through the receiver. Damian, the kids and I are waiting for you at the restaurant. We have a surprise. His expression instantly softened. I'm on my way. Hanging up, Damian glanced at his watch, his tone turning cold again. I have to go. The driver is waiting for you downstairs. As he turned to leave, his back straight and tall, Juliet's nails dug into her palms. In the end, she didn't say a word to stop him. It didn't matter. Soon enough, he would find out from Isabel that the divorce was final, that she didn't want him anymore, and she didn't want the two children who treated her like a stranger, either. Mary, Juliet pressed the call button for the head housekeeper. Please have my luggage sent to the airport. An hour later, she had deleted every one of Damian's contact numbers and left the black card in the hospital room drawer. As the plane took off, the clouds outside the window were painted a brilliant gold and red by the setting sun. Juliet gazed at the magnificent sky and closed her eyes with a smile. In this life, she would never again compromise herself for anyone. Let those days of groveling for love disappear with this plane, forever lost beyond the clouds. Ahead of her awaited a brand new future, one that belonged only to her. Chapter 9, Juliet arrived in Havenwood, a city that was a stranger to her, but its anonymity provided a sense of security. After a careful 2-week search, she opened a small, old-fashioned bookstore named Juliet's on a quiet street in the historic district. The shop was small, but it was blessed with abundant natural light. She spent 3 months renovating it, transforming the once dilapidated space into a warm, inviting haven for readers. Havenwood had a long rainy season. Juliet stood at the glass door of her bookstore, watching the drizzling rain outside. The wind chime on the door suddenly tinkled. Welcome, she said, turning instinctively, but she froze when she saw who it was. The man standing in the doorway was tall and slender, holding a long-handled black umbrella from which raindrops dripped onto the floor. He was holding a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old, who was shyly burrowing into his chest. Excuse me, do you have any picture books for this age? The man asked, closing his umbrella, his voice gentle. Only then did Juliet get a clear look at his face, sharp, defined features, eyes like a painting, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. Behind the lenses, his eyes held a faint smile. She was stunned. Ethan Hayes. From college, the man was clearly taken aback as well. He studied her for a moment, then a look of recognition dawned on his face. Juliet Archer, memories flooded back. Ethan Hayes, the star of the medical school, 2 years her senior. He had been a campus legend not just for his top grades, but also for his talent at the piano. He was the dream man of countless female students. What a coincidence, she smiled, gesturing towards the little girl in his arms. Is this my niece Korra? Ethan said, gently patting the girl's back. Korra, say hi to the nice lady. The little girl lifted her head, revealing a small, cherubic face. She whispered shyly, hello, miss. Her voice was as soft as cotton candy. Juliet's heart melted instantly. She knelt down to be at eye level with Korra. Hello, Korra. What kind of book are you looking for? I can help you find one. Korra blinked her big eyes, then reached out a small hand and gently touched Juliet's cheek. You're so pretty, she whispered. You look like my mommy. The air froze. Ethan's expression changed. He knelt and pulled Korra into a tighter hug. I'm sorry. Her mother, she passed away a few years ago from an illness. A pang went through Juliet's chest. She looked at the little girl who had lost her mother and suddenly thought of Leo and Lily. They still had Isabel. This child had no one. It's okay, she said softly, reaching out to gently stroke Korra's hair. Korra, do you like fairy tales? I have lots of beautiful picture books here. Korra nodded, her eyes lighting up. For the next half hour, Juliet patiently showed Korra all sorts of picture books. The little girl gradually relaxed, even taking Juliet's hand and asking her to read a story. Ethan stood to one side, watching them with a gentle expression. By the time Juliet was reading The Little Prince, Korra was leaning against her, completely absorbed. You have a special way of telling stories, Ethan said quietly as he paid. Korra is usually very shy, but she warmed up to you so quickly. Juliet smiled and handed the wrapped book to Korra. When I see Korra, I feel a connection too. I wish she were my daughter. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them, but Ethan just nodded thoughtfully, without asking any more questions. Can we come back again soon? Korra asked, tugging on Juliet's sleeve as they were about to leave. Juliet knelt and gently pinched her nose. "Of course, you're always welcome here." Ethan held the umbrella, carrying Korra out into the rain. Korra, leaning on his shoulder, waved at the bookstore until they disappeared around the corner. Juliet stood at the door, watching their figures vanish into the rain, a long-forgotten warmth spreading through her heart. Chapter 10. After that day, Ethan and Korra became regulars at the bookstore. Almost every weekend, they would come and spend an hour or two. Korra would sit quietly on the small sofa in the corner, engrossed in a picture book. Ethan would choose a medical journal and read silently beside her. Sometimes, Juliet would brew them a pot of herbal tea. Ethan would always thank her politely, and Korra would say a sweet, "Thank you, Miss Juliet," before burying her nose back in her book. One sunny Saturday, Ethan suggested taking Korra to the amusement park. "You should come with us," he said, pushing up his glasses, his invitation sincere. "Korra has been talking nonstop about wanting to go with you." Juliet wanted to refuse, but seeing the hopeful look in Korra's eyes, she relented. The amusement park was a cacophony of sound and excitement. Korra held Ethan's hand with her left and Juliet's with her right, skipping happily from one attraction to another. They rode the carousel, drove the bumper cars, and even waited in line for the Ferris wheel. When the Ferris wheel reached its highest point, Korra pointed to the distant clouds. "Mommy lives up there." Juliet's heart tightened. Ethan gently pulled Korra into his arms. "Mommy is watching over you from heaven," he said softly. "She wants you to be happy every day." Korra nodded, then turned to Juliet. "Can you be my new mommy?" The air froze. Juliet didn't know how to respond. Ethan quickly intervened. "Korra, don't say such things." "I'm not." Korra's little face flushed. "I like you and you like me too, right?" Juliet looked at the little girl's stubborn expression and was suddenly reminded of Lily. She was just like that, fiercely determined once her mind was set on something. "Of course I like you, Korra," she said softly, "but a mommy is one of a kind. No one can ever replace her." Korra seemed to understand, though not completely. She leaned back against Ethan. On the way home, Korra fell asleep in the back seat. Ethan drove, occasionally glancing at Juliet through the rearview mirror. "Thank you for coming with her today," he said quietly. "She hasn't been this happy in a long time." Juliet shook her head. "I was happy too." Outside the car window, the setting sun painted the clouds in brilliant shades of gold and red. Juliet instinctively raised a hand to block the light. Her sleeve slid down, revealing a scar on her wrist. Ethan's gaze lingered on the scar for a second before he quickly looked away. But for the rest of the drive, his brow remained slightly furrowed. A week later, Ethan came to the bookstore alone, holding a thermos. "I made you some calming tea," he said, handing it to her. "It might help with your sleep." Juliet froze for a moment, then asked, stunned, "How did you know I have trouble sleeping?" Even though she had left that place, she could never seem to forget the past. Countless nights, she had woken up from nightmares. Ethan pushed up his glasses, his eyes warm and perceptive. "Have you forgotten I'm a doctor? You can always come to me for help with anything. I'd like to think we're good friends by now, right?" Juliet subconsciously pulled down her sleeve, covering her wrist. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried," Ethan said quickly. "It's just as a doctor and as a friend, I hope you'll take care of yourself." Juliet was silent for a moment, then finally smiled, her eyes curving. "I will. Thank you for the tea. And if I ever really need help, I promise I'll come to you." After that, Ethan visited even more frequently, sometimes with Korra, sometimes alone. Each time, he would bring a small gift, a bouquet of wildflowers, a box of homemade cookies, or a fresh batch of his calming tea. Juliet gradually grew accustomed to his companionship. Sometimes, watching Ethan and Korra reading in the bookstore, she would feel a dream-like feeling, as if this was the life she had always yearned for, simple, peaceful, and filled with warmth. One rainy night, as Juliet was organizing the shelves, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood outside, soaked to the bone, holding a feverish Korra in his arms. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late." His voice trembled slightly. "Korra wouldn't stop crying for you. She said she can only fall asleep if you tell her a story." Juliet quickly let them in. She took the feverish Korra, her heart aching as she looked at the little girl's flushed face. She gently patted her back. "It's okay, Korra, I'm here, don't be scared." That night, Juliet sat by Korra's bed, softly reading her stories. Ethan sat nearby, watching them with a gentle gaze. When Korra finally fell asleep, the rain outside had stopped. Moonlight streamed through a gap in the curtains, casting a silver ribbon of light on the floor. "Thank you," Ethan whispered. Juliet shook her head. As she tried to stand, her legs, numb from sitting so long, gave way and she nearly fell. Ethan quickly caught her. As he helped her up, he realized just how close they were. Both of them blushed and quietly looked away. Chapter 11, it took a full month of Juliet's absence for Damian Thorne to realize something was truly wrong. He had assumed she was just playing some childish game of cat and mouse, but when he found he couldn't reach her no matter how he tried, he started to pay attention. He called her old friends, but they all claimed they hadn't seen her. He hung up annoyed and went to his study. He opened his laptop and pulled up Juliet's bank account information. The screen showed that the black card he had given her had a balance of 0. She had left with only her personal savings, not touching a single cent of the Thorne family fortune. "Ha, stubborn," he sneered, closing the laptop. She was just trying to make them come crawling back to her. Such a naive tactic would never work. The next morning at breakfast, Leo and Lily were chattering about school. Isabel gently placed food on their plates, occasionally looking up at Damian with a sweet smile. The scene looked perfectly harmonious, but for some reason, Damian felt like something was missing. "Daddy, the school has a parent-child sports day next week. Can you and Aunt Isabel come?" Lily asked, blinking her big eyes. "Of course," Damian replied automatically, then paused. Who used to go with you before? Was it your mother?" Both children made faces of disgust. "It was her, but we didn't want her to come," Leo pouted, his expression cold. "All she does is stay home and cook and clean. She never even goes out or dresses up. We didn't want her there." "Exactly," Lily agreed. "Aunt Isabel always looks so pretty. All our friends are jealous of us." Isabel smiled shyly and poured Damian a cup of coffee. "Here, Damian, I had the staff make it just the way you like it." Damian took a sip, and his brow furrowed slightly. It was too sweet. Juliet used to hand grind his coffee. She never made mistakes like this. She remembered he took his coffee black with just a single splash of cream. "What's wrong? Is it not to your taste?" Isabel asked with concern. "It's fine." He put the cup down, said nothing more, and adjusted his cufflinks. "I'm heading to the office." In the days that followed, life at the Thorne residence appeared normal on the surface, but subtle changes were quietly taking place. Isabel had never done housework. After a few failed attempts, she simply delegated everything to the staff. While the household continued to function, only Damian and the children keenly felt that something was different. There were no more soft, freshly ironed clothes. The nightly glass of milk before bed, the carefully prepared breakfasts tailored to their tastes, all of it was gone. Life went on without any major hitches, but the familiar, comforting warmth of home had vanished. One evening, Damian returned late from a business dinner. He staggered to the sofa and waved his assistant away. "You can go, I'll be fine." When the door closed, the room fell silent. Damian rubbed his temples wearily and called out instinctively, "Where is everyone?" The moment the words left his mouth, he realized something was different about tonight. The lamp wasn't left on for him. There was no steaming bowl of hangover-soothing soup on the coffee table. "Mary, didn't I say I had a dinner tonight? Why wasn't anything prepared?" He dialed the staff quarters, his voice low and demanding. A moment later, Mary, the head housekeeper, rushed into the living room, flustered. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne. In the past, Mrs. Thorne always prepared everything for your return personally. That's why we forgot. And the soup you mentioned, Mrs. Thorne always bought the ingredients herself and simmered it in the kitchen for hours. She never let us help. If you'd like some, I can go see how to make it now." Damian felt as if he had been struck. A strange emotion began to bloom in his chest. So all those things, she had prepared them all by hand. He had always known she was dedicated to the family, but he had never felt such a clear sense of regret, a feeling that he owed her something. Chapter 12, Damian stood in the center of the kitchen, the cold reflection from the marble countertops mirroring his grim face. Mary stood nearby, hands clasped, not daring to breathe. "So, for 6 years, she did all of this silently and never said a word?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Mary nodded cautiously. "The missus never let us interfere. She said you had a sensitive stomach and the store-bought remedies were too harsh. She had to watch the pot herself." Damian's fingers tapped unconsciously on the countertop for 6 whole years. Every time he came home from a social function, no matter how late, there was always a warm bowl of soup waiting for him. He had never once considered that it was the result of Juliet staying up until the dead of night. "Sir, would you like me to try too?" the butler began tentatively. "No need." Damian turned and walked towards the stairs. "Everyone, go get some rest." As he passed the master bedroom, he could hear Isabel's even breathing. She turned over in her sleep, the silk duvet rustling softly. Damian stood at the door, and for some reason, he was suddenly reminded of Juliet. When they were first married, he couldn't stand the sight of his arranged partner, so he'd often make excuses to stay out, frequently not coming home at all. But no matter when he returned, he would always find her in the living room, waiting quietly for him. Juliet was always a light sleeper. The slightest noise would wake her. Sometimes, he'd come home in the middle of the night and find her curled up on the sofa, fast asleep, the TV still on with the volume at its lowest setting. Back then, he didn't like her at all. Even seeing her like that, he wouldn't spare her a second glance and would just go straight to his room. But she had done this for years. Eventually, he started pausing for her, even covering her with a blanket. When did all of that change? It seemed to be right after Isabel came back. He was often busy handling things for Isabel, and gradually, he came home less and less. Once, Isabel mentioned wanting to see the children, so he brought them along. It seemed that from then on, they spent more and more time with Isabel, often spending the majority of their time with her. Juliet hadn't been silent about it. She had confronted him angrily. "You are my husband. Leo and Lily are my children. Why are you spending every day doting on someone else?" She paused, as if the words were hard to say, her eyes welling with tears. "The way you all are, I can't even tell who you consider the wife, the mother, in this family." But at that time, his mind was consumed with the newly returned Isabel. Her questions only made her seem unreasonable to him. He had responded coldly, "Have you forgotten, if you hadn't interfered?" Isabel was supposed to be the mistress of this house. Juliet had frozen, the look in her eyes filled with an unspeakable disappointment. At that moment, seeing the pain and disbelief in her gaze, he had felt a flicker of something. But Isabel was the one he truly loved. So he ignored the motionless Juliet and turned and left without a second thought. After that, Juliet never brought it up again, as if that conversation had never happened. He had been pleased, thinking she had finally learned her place. Lost in thought, he found himself pushing open the door to the children's room. Leo and Lily were sound asleep, their little heads resting next to each other. On the nightstand was a photo of them with Isabel, their smiles bright. The photo of Juliet had been taken down at some point. Looking at the empty space where Juliet's picture used to be, he felt an inexplicable hollowness in his own chest. He didn't return to the master bedroom. Instead, he went to the guest room. Outside, the moonlight cast a cold glow. Damian took a bottle of whiskey from the minibar and took a long swig directly from it. The fiery liquid burned his throat, but couldn't extinguish the strange unease in his heart. Chapter 13. After that night, Damian often used business trips as an excuse to be away from home. With him gone, Isabel was free to do as she pleased, spending her days at spas and salons, with no one to take them to and from school, and with Isabel having previously spoiled them by secretly letting them skip class to go out and play. Leo and Lily began to follow her example. They started cutting school and hiding out all day. When Isabel found out, she didn't care at all. "Ma'am, the young master and young miss have been skipping school frequently. The teacher has called the house, hoping you or Mr. Thorne could step in. They won't listen to a staff. Do you think you could come home and talk to them? At least get them to go to school." "All right, I've got it. I'll handle it later." Isabel lay back languidly in the salon chair, admiring her freshly manicured nails. "There's no need to tell Damian about this. He's busy enough with work. I don't want to bother him." After hanging up, a friend beside her teased, "Don't tell me you're actually going to deal with those two brats. Marrying a billionaire is great, but having those two hanging around must be a pain." "Who said I was going to deal with them?" Isabel yawned, her eyes glinting with cunning. "I'd be thrilled if they turned out to be useless. That way, they won't be competing with my future children for the inheritance." With that, she made another call, this time to Leo and Lily's homeroom teacher. "Hello, teacher. Our children have some family matters to attend to at home recently. You don't need to worry about them not being in school. You know our family's situation. They don't need to be too concerned with school. Also, their father is very busy. If there's anything, please just tell me directly. Don't bother him with it." After hanging up, she felt a sense of relief and quickly put the matter out of her mind. That evening, after her beauty treatments, she made a rare appearance at home. The living room was a mess from the children's playing. When they saw her, they ran over happily. "Aunt Isabel, you're finally back. We missed you," to their surprise. Isabel, who was usually all smiles, looked at them with a cold expression. She waved them off impatiently. "I know, I'm busy. Go play by yourselves." Leo, assuming she would still dote on him and his sister, angrily threw a toy on the floor. "No, Aunt Isabel, play with us," but his words were met with a terrifying change in Isabel's expression. Her eyes, once so gentle and kind, now held not a trace of a smile. "What did you say? Who do you think you're yelling at? Don't you know that I'm about to marry your father and become the new mistress of this house? Your father doesn't even like your pathetic mother, and soon enough, he'll get tired of you too as well." The two children huddled together in fear, not daring to breathe. The arrogant bullies who had tormented Juliet were nowhere to be seen. "Good, as long as you understand. Remember, from now on, you do what I say in this house. If you yell at me again, don't blame me for being rough." With a final, warning glance at the children, she turned coldly and went upstairs. Chapter 14. From that day on, under Isabel's influence, even the household staff began to disregard the children. Not only did no one take them to school, but soon, they stopped preparing regular meals for them. They were only allowed to eat the leftovers after Isabel had finished her own meals. The scorching summer sun beat down on New York City. The air conditioning in the Thorne penthouse hummed. Leo and Lily were on the floor of the playroom, building with Legos, occasionally stealing glances at Isabel, who was trying on lipstick in front of a vanity mirror. "Aunt Isabel," Lily began timidly, "can we have some ice cream? You promised." Last week, their father had bought Isabel new jewelry. In her good mood, she had casually kicked at the two children on the floor and promised to take them for ice cream. But Isabel didn't even turn around, her voice impatient. "Can't you see I'm busy?" "But," Leo gathered his courage and spoke up softly, "you said you'd take us last week. Are you always this annoying?" Isabel spun around, the lipstick smearing a garish red streak across her mouth. "All you think about is eating. Look at you. You're getting fat." The two children shrank back in fear. Ever since their mother had left, they hadn't felt any of Aunt Isabel's affection. Her once gentle smiles were gone, replaced by constant, impatient scowls and sharp rebukes. "Get back to your room," Isabel snapped, wiping her mouth with a tissue. "I get annoyed just looking at you." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she didn't dare to cry out loud. The last time she had cried, Aunt Isabel had pinched her thigh and threatened to throw away all her favorite toys if she told their father. Today, Damian had made a rare announcement that he would be staying home for the night. When he arrived home, the children were already asleep. Isabel, dressed in a silk nightgown, greeted him, her skin, meticulously cared for, looking soft and delicate, a faint scent of perfume lingering around her. "Finally done with work. Decided to grace us with your presence?" she cooed, taking his briefcase. "There was an issue with the merger, but it's sorted now. I'll be home more often," Damian said, loosening his tie. He looked around and suddenly asked, "Where are the kids? I haven't seen them in a while." "They're asleep. Don't worry, I've been taking good care of them," Isabel said with a smile, linking her arm through his. "Damian, there's a charity gala tomorrow, and I'm missing a matching necklace. Could you?" Damian, not really listening, nodded distractedly. "Go pick one out yourself. Just use my black card." The next morning at breakfast, he finally saw the children come down to eat. To his confusion, both Leo and Lily were unusually quiet. Looking closer, he noticed they seemed to have lost some weight, their chins were sharper. Damian put down his coffee cup, frowning. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" No, Leo shook his head frantically at the question, his hands trembling so much that his spoon clattered against the bowl. Isabel emerged from the kitchen with a fruit platter. She glanced at them and laughed lightly. "Damian, don't worry, the children are fine." She bent down and affectionately ruffled Leo's hair, her voice syrupy sweet. "Right, Leo?" Leo stiffened and mumbled, "Yes." Damian's phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the caller ID and stood up. Something came up at the office. I have to go. The moment the door closed, Isabel's smile vanished. She snatched the glass of milk from Lily's hand, her face contorted with annoyance. You're drinking so slowly, do you want to be late? Hurry up and eat. Your father is back for a few days, so you'd better behave at school. Don't cause any trouble. Or else you'll be sorry. The threat was highly effective. Lily flinched and quickly shoved a piece of bread into her mouth, accidentally choking on it, her face turning red. Useless thing, Isabel scowled in disgust, not sparing her a second glance. So pathetic, just like your mother, chapter 15 in his office. While Damian was dealing with business, his phone vibrated. It was the butler. Sir, the young master has a fever, 103.1 degrees F. We're very worried something might happen. Damian's brow tightened. Have you called a doctor? We did, but Miss Dubois said there was no rush. She went out to a party. What? Damian's expression changed abruptly, his voice tinged with surprise. I'm on my way back. Have the family doctor see him immediately. When he rushed home through the rain, he found Leo flushed red with fever, his small body trembling uncontrollably. The family doctor was administering an IV, his face grave. How did it get this bad? Mr. Thorne, the child has had a high fever for 4 hours. Any later and it could have developed into pneumonia, the doctor said in a low, serious tone. His constitution is already weak. He should have been treated sooner. A tightness gripped Damian's chest. He remembered, when Juliet was around, she could sense the slightest discomfort in the children. Often, she didn't even need a thermometer to accurately gauge their fever. Where is Isabel? I haven't seen her. The butler hesitated before finally speaking. Miss Dubois said. She said it was just a minor cold. She went to attend Mrs. Lee's birthday party and couldn't refuse. Damian pulled out his phone and dialed Isabel's number. It rang for a long time before she answered, the background filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Damian? Isabel's voice was light and cheerful, clearly having a good time. Leo's fever is almost 104. Where are you? Oh, I'm on my way back. For the first time, Damian's tone with her was harsh. Isabel's voice immediately turned frantic and wronged. I'm so sorry, Damian. I really thought it was just a common cold. I'm rushing back right now. An hour later, Isabel hurried back, still in her evening gown, her face beautifully made up. She threw herself in front of Damian, her eyes red, looking utterly pitiful. Damian, I honestly didn't know Leo was so sick. Damian looked at her exquisite makeup and the lingering smell of alcohol on her, a wave of irritation washing over him. But looking at the face he had once longed for, his heart softened. Let it go this time, just be more careful in the future. Late at night, Leo's fever finally began to break. Damian's phone rang again. It was an urgent call from his assistant. Mr. Thorne, there's an emergency at the office. We need you to handle it immediately. Damian glanced at his sleeping son on the bed, hesitated for a moment, then said, Isabel, can you watch him for a bit? I'll be back as soon as I'm done. Isabel nodded obediently, her expression gentle as water. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Leo. Damian left in a hurry, but when he reached the hospital entrance, he realized his car keys were still in the room. He turned back. As he approached the door, he heard Isabel's sharp voice from inside. You little brat, stop faking it, you made me miss the rest of the party. Leo's tearful voice, faint and weak, replied, I'm sorry, Aunt Isabel, I didn't mean to. I'm warning you, don't play the victim in front of your father. Isabel's voice was terrifyingly cold, devoid of any sympathy. If you dare say a word, just see how I'll deal with you. I won't say anything, Leo sobbed. I'll be good, please don't hit me. HMPH, smart boy. Just like your cheap mother, outside the door, Damian's world shattered. The pure, kind image of the woman he had once loved crumbled into dust. The door was kicked open with a tremendous crash. Isabel spun around in terror, meeting Damian's furious eyes. Damian? Her face went deathly pale. She stammered, Let me explain, I was just... But Damian had already strode forward and slapped her hard across the face. Isabel stumbled back, crashing into the wall, her carefully styled hair coming undone. I had no idea this is how you played the part of a good mother behind my back. Today you hit him, threaten him. Tomorrow will you be walking all over me? Get out, Damian's voice was like ice. Today you will take all your things and move out of my house. And I never want to see you again. Isabel clutched her face, tears smudging her makeup. Damian, I was just worried. I truly love these children. I'll be good to them from now on. Love, Damian sneered. Beating and threatening them is your idea of love. He turned to Leo on the bed. The child had shrunk into a ball, his face streaked with tears. Damian's heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. How blind had he been not to see the fear his children were living in? Daddy, Leo timidly reached out, his eyes filled with terror. I was wrong. I'll listen to Aunt Isabel. Just don't throw me away. Damian knelt by the bed, gripping his son's hot little hand. No, son, it was Daddy who was wrong. He turned back to Isabel, the disappointment and disgust in his eyes making her take an involuntary step back. I never imagined you were this kind of person. Isabel tried to argue, but Damian had already pressed the call button. Security, please escort this woman out, immediately. As Isabel's cries finally faded down the hallway, Damian sat wearily by the bed. Leo cautiously tugged at his sleeve, sobbing pitifully. Daddy, I miss Mommy. Will you bring her back? A lump formed in Damian's throat. He remembered Juliet's determined back as she left, remembered his own coldness and cruelty towards her. A dull ache spread through his chest. Daddy, Lily, who had woken up at some point, rubbed her eyes and came over. I miss Mommy too. When is she coming back? Damian pulled both children into his arms, unsure how to comfort them, a profound bitterness filling his heart. Chapter 16, 2 days later, Leo was finally discharged from the hospital. In the living room of the Thorne penthouse, piles of Isabel's belongings were stacked up. Isabel, in high heels, clung to Damian's sleeve, her manicured nails digging into his skin. Damian, you can't do this to me, she cried, her eyes filled with endless regret. We've known each other for 20 years, are you really going to do this over such a small thing? A small thing? Damian violently shook her off, his eyes as cold as ice. Abusing my children is a small thing? He pulled out his phone and played a surveillance video. On the screen, Isabel was viciously pinching Lily's thigh. The little girl was crying silently, too scared to make a sound. And this. He swiped to another video, showing Isabel pouring sleeping pills into the children's milk. I can't believe you would drug them just so you could go to a party. Isabel's face turned deathly pale. You were spying on me. You didn't trust me from the start? I was monitoring my home. Damian's voice was low and dangerous. Just then, a maid rushed out, her voice trembling. Sir, I have something to say. She pointed a shaking finger at Isabel, her eyes filled with undisguised disgust. From the very first time she came to this house, she's been trying to drive a wedge between the missus and the children. You're lying, Isabel shrieked. I'm not, the maid said, gathering her courage. She would always buy the children snacks and toys when the missus wasn't around, and she taught them to say bad things about their mother. I personally heard her tell the young master, your mother doesn't let you have candy because she doesn't love you. She also said that only if the young master and young miss found a way to get rid of their mother could they all truly be together. That's why the very next day, the young master pushed the missus down the stairs with his own hands. Damian's face grew darker and darker. He turned to the butler and ordered, pull up the surveillance footage from that day. When the video played on the large screen, the entire living room fell silent. On the screen, the two children, their faces twisted in malicious glee, shoved Juliet down the stairs. And moments later, when Isabel entered with Damian, an unmistakable look of triumphant joy spread across her face. Daddy? Lily suddenly ran down the stairs and threw herself into his arms, her voice choked with sobs. We were wrong, we want Mommy back, Leo followed, his face streaked with tears. Aunt Isabel said Mommy doesn't want us anymore, is that true? Isabel sneered. Of course it's true, she's already abandoned you. And for all you know, she's probably in some other man's arms right now. Damian, you have no idea, do you? What you signed that day wasn't some property agreement. It was the divorce papers Juliet gave you. You two have no legal ties anymore. You're the one who drove her away. Slap, another sharp slap cut off her venomous words. Damian's hand hung in the air, his eyes burning with an unprecedented rage. Throw all of her things out, he commanded the butler, and I don't want her taking a single thing I bought her. Isabel clutched her face, her eyes wide with disbelief. Damian, are you insane? For that washed-up housewife. Shut up, Damian roared, his face like a frozen mask. Say one more word, and I'll make sure you can never work in this city again. Chapter 17, the staff moved quickly, tossing Isabel's suitcases out the front door one by one. Her designer bags, jewelry, and high-end cosmetics scattered across the pavement like a pile of expensive trash. "You'll regret this," Isabel screamed hysterically from the doorway. "Do you really think Juliet will take you back? She's had enough of you." The heavy door slammed shut in her face, cutting off her vile curses. The living room fell into an eerie silence. Damian slowly knelt, pulling his 2 children into his arms. Their bodies were trembling, their tears soaking his suit jacket. "Daddy, does Mommy really not want us anymore?" Lily sobbed. A lump formed in Damian's throat. He remembered Juliet's determined back as she left, remembered the divorce papers he had signed with his own hand. A dull ache spread through his chest. "No, she doesn't," he said softly, as if trying to convince himself, his brow deeply furrowed. "Mommy loves you so much, she would never be able to leave you. She probably just went away to clear her head." "Then why hasn't she come back?" Leo looked up with tear-filled eyes, his small face clouded with gloom. "Is it because we pushed her down the stairs?" Damian couldn't manage a smile. He could only force himself to wipe away the boy's tears. "Daddy will find Mommy." After the staff had taken the children upstairs, Damian finally allowed himself to sink onto the sofa. He took out his phone and dialed his assistant. "Find Juliet's whereabouts," he said in a low, urgent tone. "Immediately." After hanging up, Damian's gaze fell on the family portrait above the fireplace. It was taken 3 years ago. Juliet stood at the very edge, her smile strained. But at the time, he hadn't even noticed her, let alone her expression. Looking back now, perhaps it was his repeated neglect that finally made her give up on them. "Sir," the butler's soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Dinner is ready. Shall I call the young master and young miss down?" Damian nodded, his brow still creased. "I'll eat with them tonight." In the dining room, Leo and Lily ate listlessly, the usual chatter gone. Perhaps because they hadn't been well cared for recently. The 2 children, once plump and rosy, now had sharp, thin chins. "Daddy?" Lily asked in a small voice, all her former petulance gone. "I miss Mommy. Where did she go? Why has she been gone for so long? When you find her, will she forgive us?" Damian's hand paused. For some reason, he couldn't give a certain answer. But then he thought of the years Juliet had tirelessly devoted to them, of her love for him and the children. He finally nodded, his voice firm. "No matter what, she is your mother. She used to love you more than anything. She will definitely forgive you." Late at night, Damian stood alone in his study, reviewing the surveillance footage from the past 6 months. The Juliet on the screen was always quietly doing housework, taking care of the children, waiting for him to come home. She rarely smiled, but whenever the children needed her, she was always there in an instant. Until that day, the day the children pushed her down the stairs, and he, without a second glance, walked away. Damian turned off the video, a heavy feeling settling in his chest. When he found Juliet, he would treat her right. He swore it. Chapter 18, Damian stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of his study, his knuckles tapping against the mahogany desk. The photos his assistant had just delivered were scattered across the surface, each one a knife twisting in his gut. "Are you sure it's her?" His voice was terrifyingly low. "Absolutely certain," the assistant said, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "Mrs. Thorne opened a bookstore in Havenwood. The business is doing well. These were taken last week." In the photos, Juliet stood in front of a bookstore named Juliet's. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of a sycamore tree, casting dappled shadows on her. She wore a simple linen dress, her hair cut a little shorter than when she left. She was leaning down, saying something to a small girl of about 5 or 6. Her expression held a softness he hadn't seen in a very long time. But what stung the most was the man standing beside her, tall and slender, the gaze behind his gold-rimmed glasses resting gently on Juliet. The man was holding the little girl, and the 3 of them together looked suffocatingly harmonious. "Who is the man with her?" Damian's thumb pressed down hard on the photo, smudging the man's face. "That appears to be a Dr. Ethan Hayes, a classmate of hers from college. The little girl is his late sister's child. They were only acquaintances in school. It seems they met again by chance in Havenwood. However, it seems Mrs. Thorne is quite fond of the little girl. She often spends time with her, and Dr. Hayes is always with them." "That's enough. I don't need to hear any more." Damian cut him off, a strange, sour feeling churning in his chest. How dare she? How dare Juliet look at another man with that expression? That was a tenderness that belonged only to him. Just then, the study door was pushed open. Lily and Leo ran in, barefoot, their faces streaked with tears. "Daddy," Lily threw herself against his legs. "Mary said you found Mommy, is it true?" Damian bent down and scooped up his daughter, his eyes sweeping over the photo of Juliet's smiling face. 3 months. She hadn't contacted the children once, yet here she was in a strange city, smiling so happily at someone else's child. "Can we go find Mommy?" Leo tugged at the hem of his suit jacket. "We miss her." The child's voice was like a dull knife, slowly carving up his heart. Damian stared at the happy trio in the photo and suddenly let out a cold laugh. "Get the jet ready," he told his assistant, his fingers gently wiping the tears from Lily's face. "We're going to bring Mommy home." He refused to believe that Juliet could genuinely like that doctor. This had to be a ploy to make him jealous. After all, she had once loved him so much, loved him enough to endure 6 years of his neglect. If he went to her himself, with their 2 children, she would surely soften. After all, Juliet could never bear to see him or her children hurting. Meanwhile, in a pottery studio called Mud Mischief in Havenwood, Juliet was intently shaping a lump of clay. Little Korra was perched on the workbench next to her, her small face streaked with mud. "Auntie Juliet, look at the bunny I made," the little girl said, proudly holding up a lopsided creation. Juliet leaned in for a closer look, then reached out and dabbed a bit of clay on Korra's nose. "It really is a little bunny. Shouldn't a bunny have a round nose?" Korra giggled and grabbed a handful of clay to retaliate. As the two were playfully wrestling, Ethan walked over with 3 cups of hot tea. A speck of mud had splattered onto his glasses. "You too," he said, shaking his head with a helpless but amused smile. "Are you turning this place into a battlefield?" Sunlight streamed through the skylight, illuminating the table. Ethan took out a handkerchief and naturally began to wipe the clay from Juliet's cheek. His fingers paused for a fraction of a second as they brushed against her skin. Realizing their proximity, the tips of his ears turned a faint red. Korra watched them with a mischievous grin. She suddenly put down her clay and, blinking her big eyes, looked at Juliet. "Auntie Juliet, I'm so happy. I wish I could stay with you and Uncle Ethan forever." A jolt went through Juliet. She looked up and met the gentle gaze behind Ethan's glasses. His eyes held a cautious hope that made her heart flutter. But then, the thought of Damian and her own 2 children, her expression darkened, and she didn't answer. "Korra," Ethan suddenly broke the silence, pushing a small, perfectly formed bowl towards his niece. "Look at this. Do you like it?" Korra's attention was immediately diverted, and she forgot her previous question. Juliet looked down, her fingers unconsciously stroking the rough surface of the clay. A warmth spread through her chest, tinged with an unexplainable sadness. She knew Ethan was giving her space just as he had for the past 3 months, always maintaining a perfect, respectful distance, never overstepping. "I'll go get more water," she said suddenly, standing up and hurrying away. In the restroom, Juliet stared at her reflection in the mirror. 3 months had passed. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, the tight set of her jaw had relaxed, and the scars on her body had lightened. The sun and breeze of Havenwood seemed to have healed some of her invisible wounds as well. But when Korra said, "Stay together forever," the faces that flashed in her mind were Leo's and Lily's, the 2 children she had carried for 10 months, who had then pushed her down the stairs. Could she ever truly forget the past? Chapter 19. Damian Thorne's private jet landed at Havenwood's airport that same day. The sun was blindingly hot. He squinted as he watched the bodyguards carry his 2 children down the steps. "Daddy, are we really going to see Mommy?" Lily asked, her small face tilted up, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and anxiety. "Of course," Damian said, straightening his clothes, his voice steady and confident. "Mommy will be so happy to see you." His assistant hurried over, handing him a folder. "Mr. Thorne, we've confirmed her location. She's at a pottery studio in the East District, with those 2. The folder contained a candid photo. Juliet was kneeling in front of a little girl, gently wiping a smudge of clay from her face. Standing beside her was a tall, bespectacled man, watching them with a smile. Sunlight poured through a glass window, bathing the 3 of them in a warm glow. The scene was painfully idyllic. Damian's fingers tightened unconsciously, crumpling the edge of the photo. The way that man looked at Juliet, he knew that look all too well. It was the tenderness he had never given her. "Get the car," he said coldly. We're going now. In the car, Leo and Lily were unusually quiet. They pressed their faces against the window, watching the unfamiliar city pass by, their small hands nervously clenching the fabric of their clothes. Damian noticed that both children were wearing the outfits Juliet had bought for them last year, though they were now a little too small. "Daddy," Leo asked in a small voice, his young face etched with unease. "Do you think Mommy will forgive us?" Damian didn't answer right away. He thought of the surveillance footage of Juliet's pained expression as she was pushed down the stairs and the resolute look on her face as she left. "She will," he finally said, though he wasn't sure if he was lying to them or to himself. "Mommy loves you more than anything. How could she ever abandon you?" The car pulled up in front of a pottery studio named Mud Mischief. Through the large glass window, Damian saw her immediately. She was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans, her hair tied back casually, her hands skillfully shaping a piece of clay. The sun gilded the side of her face, making her look soft and luminous. Suddenly, the little girl named Korra grabbed a handful of clay and playfully smeared it on Juliet's face. To Damian's surprise, Juliet didn't get angry. Instead, she laughed and tried to smear some back. She was laughing so freely, so joyfully it was a laugh Damian hadn't seen in a very long time. Mommy, Lily, beside him, suddenly broke free from the bodyguard's grasp and bolted towards the studio. Damian didn't have time to stop her and could only follow quickly behind. The moment he pushed the door open, a wind chime tinkled. Juliet looked up at the sound, her smile freezing on her face. "Lily." Her voice trembled slightly as her gaze traveled past the child to land on him, but her expression wasn't one of happiness. It was one of resistance and coldness. What are you doing here? How did you find me?" Korra looked curiously at the strangers who had just burst in, instinctively hiding behind Juliet. Ethan stood up, subtly positioning himself in front of them both. Mommy Leo ran in too, throwing his arms around Juliet's legs, his eyes welling with tears. "We missed you so much, Mommy. Have you been with these two people all this time? Is it because of them?" His gaze towards Korra was filled with hostility. He stared at her so intensely that Korra clutched Juliet's clothes tighter. Juliet stood frozen, her hands hovering in the air, unsure if she should hug them back. But seeing Leo's hostile glare, she snapped back to reality, and her expression grew cold. She made no move to embrace them, instead taking a small step back. Her gaze shifted between her children and Ethan, finally settling on Damian. "What are you here for?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp as a razor. Damian took a step forward, his eyes sweeping over Ethan before fixing on Juliet's face. "Juliet, we're here to take you home. Stop this nonsense. Your punishment has been sufficient. The children know they were wrong. Come back with us." The pottery studio fell deathly silent. Other customers and staff members stopped what they were doing, watching the scene with curiosity. "Home?" Juliet let out a cold laugh. "What home?" "Mommy, please come back with us," Lily begged, shaking Juliet's hand, all her former willfulness replaced by desperate pleading. "We'll never make you angry again." "Yes, Mommy," Leo added hastily. "We kicked Aunt Isabel out," Daddy said. "From now on, you're our only mommy." Juliet's expression flickered. She knelt, meeting her children's eyes. "I'm not going back with you, because not everything can be fixed with an apology." "Why?" Lily's tears streamed down her face. "Don't you love us anymore, Mommy?" The question was a dull knife, twisting deep in Juliet's heart. Chapter 20, she opened her mouth, a bitter smile on her lips. "Pushing me down the stairs, framing me for the mango incident, didn't you do those things with your own hands? Saying you didn't want me as a mother, that you only wanted Isabel, didn't those words come from your own mouths? I always thought that, while I might not have been a perfect mother, I always did my best to care for you, to love you. I just don't understand how it all ended up like this." The children's faces flushed with shame, and they couldn't find the words to respond. But Leo, unwilling to give up, pleaded again. "Mommy, we were just kids. We know we were wrong now. Please, can you forgive us?" Before Juliet could answer, Korra spoke up timidly. "Auntie Juliet." She clutched Juliet's sleeve, her big, beautiful eyes filled with tears. "Are you leaving?" Ethan bent down and picked up his niece, comforting her softly. "Korra, don't be scared. She won't leave you no matter where she chooses to go. We have to respect her decision. And even if she's not here, she'll still come visit you often." Watching this scene, a nameless fury ignited in Damian's chest. Who was this stranger to use such an intimate tone? Who was he to hold that child and stand by Juliet's side as if they were the real family? Juliet, he stepped forward, his voice low. Stop being childish. The children need you. Are you, as a mother, going to abandon your own flesh and blood to raise someone else's child? Childish? They need me. Juliet stood up, her eyes glinting with a cold light Damian had never seen before. When they pushed me down the stairs, did they need me then? When they told everyone they hated me, did they need me then? When they were calling Isabel mommy, did they need me then? Each question was like a slap, striking Damian speechless. The children cried harder, clinging to Juliet's clothes. We were wrong, mommy, Lily sobbed, gasping for breath. We'll only love you from now on, we'll never hurt you again. Juliet's eyes reddened, but her resolve didn't waver. Ethan silently handed her a tissue. This small gesture completely infuriated Damian. Who do you think you are? He demanded coldly. What right do you have to interfere in our family's affairs? Ethan calmly pushed up his glasses, his voice steady. I am Juliet's friend. As for rights, he glanced at the two weeping children. I don't think the people who hurt her have any right to ask me that question. Damian's fists clenched so tight his knuckles cracked. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, Korra whispered, Auntie Juliet, we haven't finished our bowls yet. Her words seemed to solidify Juliet's decision. She took a deep breath and turned to Damian. Please take the children and leave. I'll say it one more time, there's nothing left for us to talk about. Mommy, the two children screamed simultaneously, refusing to let go of her legs. Please don't leave us. The scene descended into chaos. The studio owner debated calling the police. Other customers pulled out their phones to record. Juliet stood at the center of the storm, her face as pale as a sheet. Damian looked at her trembling hands and suddenly realized he had made a fatal mistake. He thought bringing the children would move her, but he had failed to consider her feelings. Those wounds couldn't be erased with a simple apology, just like a shattered vase could never be perfectly repaired. Leo, Lily, he said, the words heavy in his mouth. Let's go home for now. No, Leo cried defiantly, his grip on Juliet's clothes tightening. We want Mommy. You said you would bring Mommy home with us today. You promised? Juliet closed her eyes, a silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. Ethan gently placed Korra's small hand in hers. The little girl immediately squeezed Juliet's fingers as if to give her strength. Damian, Juliet said, her voice now cold as ice, completely devoid of hesitation. Take them away. I've already told you, I cannot forgive what you all did in the past. If you're here to discuss child support, I can transfer the money without hesitation. As for anything else, don't bring it up with me again. If you come back, I won't hesitate to call the police. Her words struck Damian like a hammer, shattering his confidence completely. He had been so sure she would soften, that she would come back for the children's sake. He never imagined her resolve to leave would be so absolute. He bent down and forcibly picked up his two children, ignoring their frantic struggles and cries, and strode towards the door. Before leaving, he glanced back one last time. Juliet was kneeling on the floor, comforting Korra. Ethan stood beside them. The three of them looked so close, so happy. Chapter 21. Back in the pottery studio, a quiet calm had settled. Juliet mechanically worked the clay in her hands, her knuckles white from the force of her grip. Korra sat quietly beside her, casting worried glances in her direction from time to time. Auntie Juliet, the little girl finally ventured, her bright eyes filled with concern. Are you sad? You don't look happy. Juliet's hands paused. She forced a smile. No, Korra, don't worry about me. Go on and finish your little bowl. Ethan silently brought her a glass of warm water, placing it gently beside her. Do you want to take a break? She shook her head, her gaze falling on the half-finished bowl in front of her. It was lopsided and misshapen, just like her feelings at that moment. The image of Leo and Lily's tear-streaked faces kept flashing in her mind, making her chest feel tight. They looked thinner, she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Ethan didn't reply, just sat quietly beside her. Sunlight streamed through the window, making the little bowl Korra was making glow softly. Uncle Ethan, Korra said thoughtfully, a new idea sparking in her eyes. Let's make a present for Auntie Juliet. Ethan gently ruffled his niece's hair. Good idea, Korra. What do you want to make? A little house, Korra said excitedly. That way, Auntie Juliet will have a new home. The innocent words made Juliet's eyes sting. She looked at the little girl seriously shaping the clay and at Ethan, who was guiding her with such focus. She suddenly realized without her noticing, these two people had become an essential part of her life. "Korra," she asked softly, "why do you want to make me a house?" The little girl looked up, her eyes clear and deep. "Because you're not happy. Uncle Ethan says a home should be a place that makes you happy. I want you to be happy." Juliet's eyes reddened again. Ethan pushed up his glasses, a little embarrassed, the tips of his ears turning pink. "Out of the mouths of babes, Juliet, don't be sad." "Thank you both," Juliet said suddenly, her voice choked with emotion. But then she broke into a teary smile. "Meeting you has made me very happy." Korra immediately threw her arms around her, her small hands holding her neck tightly. "Then can we stay together forever? Like a real family?" Ethan's hand froze in midair, a piece of clay slipping through his fingers. His eyes met Juliet's, and both of them blushed. "Korra," he gently chided, saying that might put pressure on her. "It's okay," Juliet laughed softly, stroking the little girl's hair. She looked at Ethan, her gaze soft but firm. "I would be honored to be a part of your lives." Two pairs of eyes lit up before her, shining like brilliant stars. Looking at the big and small figures in front of her, Juliet couldn't help but smile, the ache in her chest gradually replaced by a new emotion. It was a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a very long time. Chapter 22, it had been raining in Havenwood for days, and even business at Juliet's had slowed to a crawl. But for a week straight, a black Maybach had been parked across the street. It waited there, stubbornly, never leaving. "Auntie Juliet, look at my drawing." Korra came running over, holding up a crayon picture, but stopped short when she saw Juliet's expression. "Auntie," Korra asked cautiously, "are you unhappy again?" Juliet managed a faint smile, not answering directly. She took the drawing. "This is wonderful. Is this a little rabbit?" "Uh-huh," Korra nodded enthusiastically, then pointed out the window. "Is it because those bad people are back that you're sad?" Ethan emerged from behind a bookshelf, holding a steaming cup of herbal tea. He subtly moved to stand in front of the window, blocking the view of the street. "Should we call the police?" he asked softly, his gaze fixed on the luxury car that had been parked there for a week. Through the rain, he could just make out two small figures pressed against the car window, staring forlornly at the bookstore. Juliet shook her head, her tone cold. "They'll give up eventually." The rain began to fall harder. Suddenly, the car door across the street flew open. Lily, holding an oversized black umbrella, stumbled out and ran towards the bookstore. The rain soaked her dress and little leather shoes, but she paid it no mind, pounding stubbornly on the locked glass door. "Mommy, please open the door," her small voice, choked with tears, pierced the downpour. "I know you're in there. Mommy, you can see us. Why won't you talk to me and my brother? Do you really not want us anymore?" Juliet's fingers clenched the curtain, her knuckles turning white. Ethan silently moved to her side, his warm hand gently covering her trembling one. "This is the last time," Juliet said suddenly, her gaze hardening with resolve. "This time, I'll go and settle things with them for good." With that, she took out her phone, found the number she had blocked long ago, and sent a text message. In a nearby cafe, Juliet chose a seat by the window and waited. Before long, Damian arrived with the two children. He was uncharacteristically not in a suit. A simple white shirt, wrinkled and damp, clung to his frame. There were dark circles under his eyes. The children looked pitiful in their dirty clothes. They seemed to have lost weight, looking utterly wretched. "Mommy," Lily rushed towards her, but just as she was about to reach her, Juliet sidestepped her embrace. "Sit down," Juliet said, gesturing to the chair opposite her, her voice unnervingly calm. Damian's Adam's apple bobbed. "Juliet," he began, his voice strained. "The children haven't been doing well. Their health was never strong to begin with, and now without a mother's care." "I know," she cut him off, pulling a manila folder from her bag. "These are the growth journals I kept for them, from birth until now. Everything you need to know about taking care of them is in here. There's also a list of their allergies and medication records. They're old enough now, I'm sure you can manage." Damian's face went white. "What do you mean by this?" he stammered. "I don't want these, Juliet, don't you understand? We just want you back." Juliet didn't look at him. She looked down, a sarcastic smile playing on her lips, and slowly rolled up her left sleeve, revealing a jagged scar. "Remember this, from the broken glass when Leo pushed me down the stairs. That night, I needed 12 stitches at the hospital, and at that very moment, you were all at home with Isabel, a happy, loving family. The color drained from Leo's face. He stared at the scar in horror, his lips trembling. "Mommy, I didn't mean to," Juliet shook her head gently, then lifted the hem of her dress to reveal the gruesome scar on her leg. It was a massive, centipede-like mark that ran down her calf, as if a chunk of flesh had been gouged out. "And this is from when Isabel and I were trapped in the elevator. You said she was a dancer, so you abandoned me without a second thought. I was this close to losing my leg. Every single one of you says you didn't mean to." Juliet's voice was soft, but it cut like a knife. "Just like when you deliberately framed me for the mango incident, or when you told everyone how much you hated me." She turned her gaze to Damian, her eyes filled with undisguised scorn. "What about me? All the pain I've endured, is it supposed to just disappear because of your careless? I didn't mean to." Lily burst into tears, throwing herself forward to grab her arm. "But we know we were wrong now, Mommy. Please come back, we'll never do it again." Juliet looked at her weeping daughter, the child she once held so dear, and felt a strange calm. The familiar, wrenching pain was gone. She just sat there, waiting for the sobs to subside. "I used to," she said slowly, each word feeling like it was being squeezed from her chest. "I used to love you all so much. When Lily was born premature, weighing just 4 pounds, I sat by her incubator for 7 days and 7 nights. When Leo was bullied and was too scared to go to school, I walked him to his classroom door every single day. I remembered every one of your birthdays, baked you cakes with my own hands. But love can be exhausted. When you pushed me down the stairs, when you said you never wanted to see me again, when you chose Isabel as your mother, whatever bond we had, it ended right there. I came here today to tell you this." Juliet stood up, placing cash under her cup. Her words were deliberate and final. "I'm not coming back. This isn't to punish you. It's because I have a new life now, and I have no desire to be dragged back into the mud with you." She turned and walked out without hesitation. Lily's heart-wrenching cries echoed behind her, but her steps never faltered. "Mommy, please don't leave us." Juliet pushed open the cafe door. Across the street, Ethan was waiting by his car with Korra. The little girl saw her and immediately let go of her uncle's hand, running towards her. "Auntie Juliet," Korra flew into her arms, her small hands anxiously touching her face. "Are you okay? Did they bully you?" Juliet bent down and scooped up the little girl, kissing her soft cheek. "I'm fine. Let's go home." Ethan came over. He didn't ask any questions, just gently placed an arm around her shoulders. Their figures, walking towards the car, looked so harmonious in the sunlight. Inside the cafe, Lily's sobs gradually faded. Damian stared blankly out the window, watching Juliet get into the unfamiliar car. He watched the little girl lean affectionately against her, and saw the man with glasses gently fasten her seatbelt. "Daddy," Leo tugged at his sleeve, his voice filled with a fear he had never known before. "Is Mommy really never coming back?" Damian didn't answer. The certainty he had felt before arriving was now completely gone. This time, it seemed they had truly and completely lost her. Chapter 23, Juliet stood on the balcony, watching Korra water the flower bed in the yard below. The little girl, in a pale yellow sundress, hummed an off-key tune as she skipped about, looking utterly content. "What are you thinking about?" A pair of warm arms wrapped around her from behind. Ethan's chin rested gently on her shoulder. He still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic, clearly having just come from work. "I was just thinking," Juliet smiled before she even turned around. "About the first time we met, when you brought Korra in to buy picture books." Ethan chuckled, the eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses filled with warmth. "Even back then, I was thinking, how is it that my old college friend is still so beautiful after all this time?" "Such a smooth talker," Juliet said, lightly punching his shoulder, laughing uncontrollably. Their laughter caught Korra's attention. The little girl dropped her watering can and flew up the stairs like a little butterfly. "Uncle Ethan, Auntie Juliet, what secrets are you two telling?" Ethan bent down and scooped up his niece, kissing her dirt-smudged cheek. "I was just asking Auntie Juliet if she'd be willing to stay with us forever." Korra's eyes lit up instantly. She grabbed Juliet's sleeve. "Really? Is Auntie Juliet going to stay with us forever?" Juliet's heart felt as if it were soaking in warm water. She took Korra from him and, under the little girl's expectant gaze, nodded. "If that's what Korra wants." I do," Korra cheered, throwing her arms around Juliet's neck before turning to Ethan. "Uncle, hurry up and give her the ring just like on TV." The tips of Ethan's ears turned red. He pulled a small, red velvet box from his pocket and knelt on one knee. "Juliet Archer," his voice trembled slightly. "Will you?" "I will," Juliet answered firmly before he could even finish the question. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her lips were curved in a blissful smile. Their wedding was set for 3 months later. On the day of the wedding, the sun was unusually bright. Juliet, in a simple white gown, holding a bouquet of wildflowers picked by Korra, walked towards Ethan amidst the blessings of their friends and family. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Korra couldn't wait any longer. She rushed into Juliet's arms and, in a clear, bright voice, called out, "Auntie!" Behind the crowd of guests stood 3 solitary figures, 1 large and 2 small. "I'll handle it," Ethan said, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "No, I'll go myself." Juliet took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance, holding her dress. The moment she opened the door, Lily rushed forward. "Mommy, you look so beautiful today." Juliet took a step back, avoiding her embrace. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. Damian's gaze fell on the wedding ceremony behind her, his voice hoarse, his eyes filled with nostalgia and regret. "We mean no harm, we just wanted to wish you well." "That's not necessary," Juliet's voice was calm. "Please leave." Her voice was quiet but resolute. Damian's face turned ashen. He grabbed his 2 crying children, his eyes filled with a new kind of despair. "Leo, Lily, let's go." "No," Lily broke free from her father's grasp and threw herself at Juliet's legs, screaming and crying. "Mommy, please look at me, just look at me." Juliet looked down at the daughter she had once cherished, but she didn't bend down. She just gently pried the small hands away. "Goodbye, Lily, and you too, Leo. Don't come looking for me again. Go live your new lives. I'm starting my own new life now." As she turned, she heard Damian's suppressed sobs and the children's heart-wrenching cries behind her. But when she walked back into the wedding, saw Korra running towards her with a small flower basket, and saw Ethan standing in the sunlight, smiling at her, those sounds became distant and blurry. Later, Juliet heard from their old butler that things were not well at the Thorne residence. After Isabel was thrown out, the house was a mess. Damian was consumed by work, and the 2 children were sent to boarding school, their behavior growing more and more erratic. They tried to come find her in Havenwood again, but they were stopped by security at the entrance to her community. Sometimes, Juliet would dream of the past. She would dream of staying up all night when Leo had a high fever, of the first time her children smiled and called her mommy. When she woke up, Ethan would always sense it immediately, pulling her into his arms and comforting her softly. "Juliet, do you ever regret it?" he asked her once, hesitantly. Juliet looked at the 2 stray cats playing in the yard with Korra and shook her head. "My life is happy now, the road ahead is bright, I'm not looking back." Just then, Korra ran over, holding the 2 small cats, her face smudged with grass. "Auntie," she exclaimed happily, "they're so cute, can we keep them?" "Of course we can," she said with a smile, lovingly stroking Korra's sweaty little face. "This is our home, what you say goes." Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the 3 of them. The darkness that had once enveloped her would never touch her again.